The air in the U.S. Capitol felt heavier than usual. It wasn't just another congressional hearing. It was the day Captain Ibrahim Traoré walked into the lion's den. Journalists whispered. Senators watched with narrowed eyes. Some smirked. Others looked confused. "What's an African soldier doing in our chambers?" a staffer muttered under her breath. J.D. Vance leaned back in his chair, his fingers laced behind his head, a smug grin creeping across his face. He had come prepared, with talking points, with subtle jabs, with rhetorical traps designed to paint Traoré as an outsider who didn't belong on a stage like this. As Traoré stepped forward, dressed not in a suit, but in his military uniform, some senators scoffed. But he didn't flinch. He stood tall, calm, collected, eyes steady. He wasn't there to impress. He was there to speak the truth. And yet no one in that room, not even his closest supporters, was ready for what was about to unfold. By the time this day ended, people wouldn't just listen to him. They would weep, reflect, and begin questioning everything. But first came the silence. A silence so sharp, it felt like the room had stopped breathing. J.D. Vance took the microphone with the confidence of a man who thought he already won. "Ibrahim Traoré," he said, his voice cutting. "A military leader from a country most Americans couldn't find on a map. You talk about sovereignty, but tell me, do you even understand democracy?" Gasps. Cameras clicked. Some aides exchanged wide-eyed glances. Traoré's expression didn't change, not even a flicker of anger. He simply looked at Vance, then down at the floor. For a moment it looked like he was searching for words, or maybe just letting the insult land. Vance wasn't done. "You claim to fight for your people," he added, leaning forward, "but you took power by force. How are you different from any other strong man in history?" Another pause, another silence. And then Traoré calmly stood, adjusted the microphone, and spoke, not loudly but in a voice so grounded, so full of quiet fire, that every camera lens seemed to zoom in at once. "Senator," he began, "let me tell you a story. Not from a book, not from a think tank, but from a village in Burkina Faso, a place where children drink from rivers, and mothers pray their sons don't disappear at night." You could hear a pin drop. He wasn't answering Vance. He was about to change the conversation entirely. Traoré's voice dropped lower, firmer, slower. "There was a boy named Mamadou," he said. "He was 10 years old, laughed with his whole face. He wanted to be a doctor. He asked me once, 'Captain, do doctors in America have clean hospitals like the ones in books?'" Some senators shifted uncomfortably. Traoré paused. "One night, his village was attacked by a foreign-backed militia. I arrived the next day. His body was the first I found, burned, curled. His mother was holding what was left of his shoe." His voice cracked for just a second, but he kept going. "I didn't take power because I wanted it. I took it because no one else showed up. No one sent help. No one cared. And if you had seen what I saw, Senator Vance, if you had smelled that smoke, you wouldn't ask me about democracy. You'd ask me how I stayed sane." Eyes welled. Even the most hardened aides looked away. Vance didn't respond. Not yet. Because in that moment, Ibrahim Traoré had already won something far more powerful than an argument. He had taken the moral ground, wrapped it in grief, and laid it at the feet of a Congress that never saw it coming. As the silence lingered in the chamber, J.D. Vance leaned in and forced a smile. "That's touching," he said with a shrug. "But emotional stories don't build nations. Institutions do. Order, elections, process." The room shifted again, some nodding, others uncomfortable. A few journalists typed faster. They knew this was no longer politics. This was personal. Traoré didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his uniform and pulled out a folded photo. He held it up, letting the camera capture it clearly. Mamadou, smiling with missing front teeth, holding a stick like it was a sword. "This boy is the reason I'm here," Traoré said. "You talk about elections. We can't have elections in villages where warlords burn the ballot boxes. You talk about institutions. We ask for partnerships, but are sent loans, weapons, or silence." J.D. Vance opened his mouth to respond, but Traoré raised his hand gently, and the room froze. "Let me finish, Senator. You've spoken about democracy. Let me show you what it looks like when it's denied generation after generation." There was no performance, just truth, and it was heavier than steel. And now, no one was sure who was really in control of the room. Traoré took out another piece of paper, this one old, yellowed edges curled like it had been folded and unfolded 1,000 times. He smoothed it carefully on the table in front of him. "This," he said, "is a letter written to me by Mamadou's mother. She wrote it after burying him herself." The room fell to a dead silence. Traoré began to read aloud. "Captain Ibrahim, you were the only one who came. You held my hand when I could not stand. They told me I should hate the world, but I saw you carry the children out with your own hands. Please never stop. Not for my son, but for the others who are still alive. Do not let them forget us." Some senators lowered their eyes. One reached into her jacket to wipe a tear quickly before the cameras caught her. Traoré folded the letter again. "You speak of democracy, Senator," he said quietly. "But to us, justice is when children live to see tomorrow. Freedom is when a mother doesn't have to write letters like this." This wasn't a speech anymore. This was a funeral. For innocence, for ignored lives, and for the illusion that one side held moral superiority. J.D. Vance was no longer smirking. His face had hardened, but not with confidence, with discomfort. He turned to look at his colleagues. Some wouldn't meet his eyes. Traoré sat, hands folded, not triumphant, not smug, just still. Then a soft voice came from one of the senators, an older man from the Midwest. "Captain Traoré," he asked gently, "how can we help? Not as politicians, as humans." The question landed like thunder. The room changed. Viewers watching live on C-SPAN felt it. Twitter exploded. The YouTube livestream chat was filled with crying emojis, people typing, "I never knew," and "This man speaks truth." Traoré finally smiled, but it wasn't one of victory. It was one of pain. "You can listen," he said, "not with answers ready, but with your heart open. Africa is not asking for pity. We are asking for partnership, not to be saved, but to be seen." In the corner, J.D. Vance picked up his papers, slowly, with his jaw clenched. And for the first time that day, he looked like a man who had nothing left to say. Just as the hearing seemed to reach a still moment, Ibrahim Traoré reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. He held it up, not like a weapon, but like evidence. "This," he said, "contains videos recorded by civilians in my country. Not edited, not dramatized, just real people, real lives, real screams." A murmur ran through the room. One of the committee members leaned forward. "What kind of videos?" she asked cautiously. "Footage of attacks funded by foreign arms," Traoré replied, "including weapons traced back to Western manufacturers." He plugged the flash drive into the congressional monitor. The room darkened as the first video began. It was shaky, shot from a phone. Children hiding in trees. A woman dragging her wounded husband by the arms. The faint sound of an aircraft. Then, gunfire, screams, dust. No narration, just reality. By the second video, a cameraman in the room lowered his camera. A senator covered her mouth. J.D. Vance sat frozen. "I came here to talk," Traoré said softly. "But maybe what we need is for you to watch." And watch they did. Because in those unfiltered seconds, truth screamed louder than politics ever could. The third video showed a classroom, children singing. Then, a sudden blast. The camera fell sideways. Screams again. A little girl with blood down her face trying to help a smaller boy up. "Get up, Isa, get up," she cried. Then it cut to black. When the lights came back on, there was silence. But not the cold, political kind from earlier. This was silence filled with pain. One senator, known for his hardline stance on military aid, had his head in his hands. Another, who hadn't spoken in years during live hearings, whispered, "Oh my God." J.D. Vance? He just stared forward. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. And Ibrahim Traoré? He stood again. "I do not show you this for sympathy," he said, voice calm but cracking slightly. "I show you this because when people ask why I stood up, why I took power, this is the answer. Not ambition, not ego, just desperation and duty." A woman in the press row wiped tears from her eyes. A Capitol aide whispered, "This is going viral. It's everywhere." But Traoré wasn't thinking of views or clips. He was thinking of the children who would never sing again, and the girl whose brother didn't get up. As the hearing continued, one voice broke through from the back row. A young congressional aide, barely in her 20s, whispered something. Everyone turned toward her. She stood up, hands shaking, and asked without permission, "Captain Traoré, my brother served in Burkina Faso. He said he met you once, said you saved a whole school." Traoré looked up, surprised. "What's his name?" he asked. "Private Jamie Collins," she replied. Traoré nodded slowly. "The tall one, with a scar on his arm?" She smiled through tears. "Yes, that's him." Traoré stepped toward her slowly and said, "Your brother carried a wounded girl 5 miles through the jungle. He didn't know her name, just knew she was hurt. We were the only two who stayed behind that day." Now the room was no longer politics. It was personal, real, human. The aide covered her mouth and sobbed. "He always said you were the bravest man he'd ever met." Traoré didn't smile. He simply said, "We were all just trying to make sure that girl lived." And in that one exchange, the room forgot about borders, titles, and flags. It remembered heart. As the emotions swelled, J.D. Vance finally spoke again, but his voice had changed. He didn't raise it. He didn't interrupt. He simply looked at Traoré with eyes no longer arrogant, but unsure. "Do you ever regret it?" Vance asked. "Taking power the way you did?" Everyone turned. That wasn't the question they expected. Traoré paused. The cameras zoomed in. Viewers leaned forward on couches and phones across the world. "Yes," Traoré said. The room froze. "I regret every day that I didn't come sooner, that I waited for permission from systems that never protected us. The children had to die before I acted." He looked straight at Vance. "I don't regret fighting. I regret waiting to fight." You could hear sniffles in the chamber. One senator reached for tissues. A journalist tweeted, "He just said the quiet part out loud. It's not about politics, it's about pain." J.D. Vance nodded. Slowly. He didn't debate, didn't defend. And in that moment, the crowd watching live saw something they never expected. A man who came to attack Ibrahim Traoré, beginning to understand him. A staffer quietly handed Ibrahim Traoré a small envelope. "This arrived during your testimony," she whispered. Traoré opened it on the spot. Inside was a crumpled letter, clearly written in haste. The handwriting was messy, almost trembling. He read aloud, "Captain Traoré, I served in Burkina Faso 2 years ago. I watched our mission fall apart because of the deals our side made with the wrong people. You didn't know me, but I saw you walk through a burning village carrying a baby on your back. No guards. Just heart. When the world calls you a threat. I remember that day. You were the only one who stayed. Corporal Dennis Lee, U.S. Army. Retimar. Gasps filled the chamber. The cameras caught Senator Vance glancing downward, rubbing his forehead. Traoré folded the letter, his fingers trembling now. Even in silence, he said, there are those who remember the truth. The entire internet lit up. And Traoré truth trended worldwide. TikTokers began posting tears, YouTubers clipped the moment, and across continents people whispered, he didn't come to defend himself, he came to defend the forgotten. Just when it seemed like things were settling, J.D. Vance did something no one expected. He leaned forward and whispered into his mic, my grandfather raised me, a coal miner, poor, died from black lung. When I was young, I thought pain made people dangerous. But maybe it just makes them brave. The words weren't written. They weren't rehearsed. They were raw. Vance looked straight at Traoré. I attacked you because I thought you were a threat to order. But maybe the real threat is what we choose to ignore. A silence fell again. But this one wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Traoré nodded, his voice soft. I understand why you came at me. You were protecting something. But I am too. We're just standing on different ends of the same fire. And in that quiet moment, one born not of politics but pain, something changed. They didn't agree, but they understood. And that understanding broke down more walls than any argument ever could. As the hearing drew on, a small voice called out from the gallery. Captain Traoré? The voice cracked. Security glanced around, ready to step in, but Traoré raised a hand gently. Let her speak, he said. A woman stood up. She wore a red scarf and clutched a folded photo. My name is Halima Diarra, she began. I'm not American. I'm from Burkina Faso. I flew here on a visitor visa because I heard you'd be here today. She held up the photo with trembling hands. This is my son. His name was Amin. The chamber grew still. He died in a village attack 2 years ago. But before he died, he told me something. He said, Mama, a man came, a soldier. He told us not to give up. Her voice cracked fully now. I never saw the soldier. I didn't know if he was real. But now, I know. She looked at Traoré, tears flooding her face. It was you. Even the cameras couldn't hide the tears on the faces of senators. Even J.D. Vance wiped his eyes. And Traoré? He simply whispered, Amin gave me water when I had none. He was brave. I just tried to be like him. For a long moment, no one moved. The woman in the red scarf stood sobbing. Ibrahim Traoré stood frozen, eyes glassy, lips pressed shut. And then it happened. First, a single congresswoman stood, silently. Then another. One by one, the chamber rose to their feet. Not in politics, not in ceremony. In grief. In respect. A quiet, powerful standing ovation. Not for power, not for politics, for humanity. J.D. Vance stood last, looking shaken but resolute. He looked toward Traoré and said softly into the mic, I was wrong. 4 words, that's all. But it changed the temperature of the room. The press row didn't scribble, they just stared. And Traoré, holding back the weight of 100 names and 1,000 ghosts, replied, You weren't wrong to ask. You were just afraid to hear. Those words broke the dam. One senator wept openly. The young aide from earlier rushed to hug the woman in the red scarf. Even the security guards turned away, blinking back emotion. This was no longer a hearing, it was a reckoning. And in the middle of it all, Ibrahim Traoré stood, not as a witness, but as a mirror. The hearing ended, not with applause or gavel, but with silence. Raw, open, respectful silence. The cameras slowly faded to black, but the moment didn't stop there. Across social media, Phones buzzed and screens lit up with a flood of reactions. I can't stop crying. My son just hugged me and asked if he could be like Traoré when he grows up. This isn't politics, this is humanity. Even political commentators known for their cynicism wipe their eyes on live TV. The phrase "the silence heard around the world" began trending. And back inside the chamber, as people quietly filed out, J.D. Vance approached Traoré. Not as an opponent, not even as a senator, just as a man. He extended his hand and said, "I still don't understand everything you've been through, but I respect it, and I believe you." Traoré shook his hand firmly. "That's all I ever asked." Somewhere a cameraman whispered, "This isn't just history, this is healing." Just as Traoré was about to leave the hearing room, an aide rushed up to him. "Sir, there's a call for you. They said it's urgent," said their name was Commander Ellis. Traoré froze. That name hadn't touched his ears in over a decade. He took the phone in silence. "Captain," came the gruff voice. "I see the world finally heard what I've known since the day you shielded children with your own body." It was his former American military advisor, someone Traoré had worked under during peacekeeping missions long before politics. "You were never a soldier for war, Ibrahim. You were a soldier for souls." Traoré didn't reply. He couldn't. His lips trembled. "I was ordered not to intervene that day. You disobeyed, and I stayed silent." Then after a long pause, "I'm sorry." Traoré finally spoke. "I forgave you years ago, Commander. You were just doing your job. I was just doing mine." "No," Ellis said, choking on his words. "You were doing what was right." The call ended, and for the first time since he entered the room that day, Traoré sat down. Not from weakness, but from relief. As Traoré walked out of the Capitol building, cameras flashed and crowds waited. But then, something cut through the noise. "Mr. Traoré," a tiny voice called. A little black boy, no older than 7, squeezed through the crowd holding a small handmade flag. Half American, half Burkinabe. Traoré kneeled down. The boy's voice trembled. "My name's Elijah. My mama said you're why she stopped crying." He handed Traoré the flag. "I made this in school. They said we should draw someone we want to be." He pointed to the little figure on the flag. Dark skin, green beret. "It's you." The crowd went quiet. Traoré blinked away tears, then opened his arms. Elijah ran in and hugged him tightly. One journalist whispered to another, "We came here for a debate. We witnessed a movement." As Traoré lifted the boy in his arms, someone in the crowd began to clap. Then more and more. Not political applause, human applause. It swept across social media, across continents. Millions of parents cried. Young boys and girls found a new kind of hero, and one small flag became a symbol, not of a nation, but of hope. Back at his hotel, away from cameras, Traoré sat quietly on the bed. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from everything he'd carried for years. He looked at the little flag from Elijah, then at the worn letter from Corporal Dennis, then at the photo from Halima. He pulled out a pen. On a small card, he wrote one sentence. It read, "If pain made me dangerous, then hope made me unstoppable." He left the card on the nightstand and went to sleep for the first time in months without nightmares. Now it's your turn, my friend. If this story made you cry, if it touched something deep inside you, if it reminded you that courage doesn't wear suits, it wears scars, then don't just scroll away. Like this video if you believe truth still matters. Comment below with one word that describes how this made you feel. Subscribe so you never miss another moment that shakes your soul. Let's build a community that stands with people like Ibrahim Traoré, who fight with heart, speak with truth, and carry a continent on their shoulders. because when the world goes silent, we must become the sound. Ibrahim Traoré, real heroes. Humanity first.